he is an example of someone where the media narrative was way outside the bounds of what the media story actually was.
I don't know that people generally understand how the business of college athletics works.
Purely from a business perspective, the vast majority of college sports would not exist.
That's exactly right. I've always found is that there's opportunity in chaos. Instead of just sitting in the stands and being mad about it, you can actually do something about it. So you can help your school. Everyone that's involved with college sports knows that the NCAA is broken.
Clay Travis here with Cody Campbell. Some of you may well have heard of Cody here as we have been trying to figure out what the future of college football is. I want to be doing more of these conversations where you can sit back, you can listen, you get the opportunity to digest them, long form, not trying to clip 30 seconds out of this thing. We're going to have a conversation for all of you out there that are big college football fans, which I bet is everybody who's going to watch or listen to this this entire interview or watch any part of it. Our goal is, hey, we love college football. How do we make it better for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What decisions need to be made? And Cody, I'll bring you in right here. We'll go into college football in a little bit. But your name has been in a ton of headlines. I'm sure that's somewhat a little bit unique for you. But before we get into college football today, I just want to kind of lay out your background. So you are a fourth-generation Texas Tech Red Raider. What's the first game that you remember going to? Is there one that stands out in your mind with your dad, your grandpa, your family?
I was going to them for so long I can't even remember.
Yeah.
My dad played football there in the early 70s, and so just always grew up watching them and loving them. The thing I can remember the most though is that and this is how much college sports have changed. But there used to only be like 2 games on every Saturday on TV, and so we used to have to listen to them on the radio.
Oh yeah, I remember.
We weren't there in person, and so I can vividly remember listening to Texas Tech football games on the radio with my dad as a pretty little kid.
Yeah,
and so it's that place has been very important to me my entire life. And as I tell people out there regularly, I'm chairman of the board now, Board of Regents, and been very involved with the football team and everything else the time I played there through now. But it made me who I am. Met all my best friends there and my wife. And of course my family connections to it. So it's a cool place, and Lubbock, Texas is a neat town to be.
For people who have never been to Texas Tech before, who have never been to Lubbock before, what should they know?
It's a bigger city than people say. We always get the reputation of just tumbleweeds blowing through town and stuff. It's about 300,000 people. Everything is focused on Texas Tech. It's a campus of 40,000 students. It's a national level research institution. We attract kids from all over the world to go to school there. The best thing about it, though, honestly, is the people. It's very conservative, very West Texas values, which you have to be from there to understand it. But it's one of the best places in the country, I think.
When did you start to recognize, hey, I might be good enough to play college football? Was there a moment when you were a kid? Obviously, you grew up playing football. Was there a moment where you started thinking, hey, I got the talent to be able to do this?
So I was actually raised in a small town called Canyon. It's like 10,000 people where it was when I was growing up there. And I had no idea. My coach called me in after my junior season and said, hey, I think you can play college football. And I was like, really? All right, well, I guess I'll go do it. And back then, the recruiting process wasn't, doesn't start when you're in 8th grade or whatever. It started after your junior year. And then once your senior year was over, you went on your 4 recruiting visits, and then you decided, and then you signed on February 2nd or whatever, National Signing Day. And so I went through that process, and we were kind of out of the way, and so not a lot of colleges came through to see us. But I started to get some attention my senior year, and then I realized, okay, I can really do this. And
you commit to go play for Mike Leach. Mm-hmm. I know Mike Leach. I'll tell a Mike Leach story. I bet you got a billion Mike Leach stories. I got to know Mike because he became a fan of OutKick. We would have him on the show a lot. I had not been to Key West for a long time, and I was going with my family, and I texted Mike, and I was like, hey, just, kind of give me an idea. Where do you think we should go? And I remember I was doing my radio show, and one day we're taping, and I get about 6 texts in a row with the most unbelievably detailed suggestions of where I should go all over Key West. Another thing about Mike Leach, who lived in Key West, for y'all who don't know it, after he left, after the Texas Tech implosion and mess there, and he reached out during the early days of COVID, and no sports are going on. And he said, Clay, I want to come on and just talk about the Tiger King.
Yeah.
No, nothing else. Like, I got so many thoughts about this. So you can go back and you can listen to it. I love it. I love him. I still miss him because I never knew when I was going to look down and just get a zany text from him. What was Mike Leach like as a head coach? What was it like to be recruited by him?
So when he passed away, everybody has funny stories about him like that. And so I played for him and then remained friends with him until he died. And, people ask me, well, what funny? I'm sure you have a lot of funny stories about him. And from playing, I was like, man, actually, I don't have many at all. All I can remember is him just being so hard on us.
Really?
And so difficult to play for and so tough. And
in terms of his expectations
were real. And he was unrelenting. And so, the thing I'll tell people is that when I played for him, I really didn't always enjoy it.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, I really appreciate it because he had these mantras that he kind of always stated over and over and over again. And it became tedious just to hear him. And one of them was, don't confuse activity with results, which means if you show up to practice that day, just because you got suited up and you did stuff, doesn't mean you got any better. So I just heard that a million times and it kind of stuck with me. And now, into my adult life and my business career, just because I went to the office today and, had some meetings, did I really get anything accomplished? Did I create any value? And then with my home life, with my family, all right, I was home, but was I really present with them? And was I a good dad and a good husband? And so that's just, one of the many principles that he kind of forced us to live by. And he was so unrelenting and so detail oriented that we all kind of became that way too. And, I think the biggest thing he was really good at, and probably the number one thing I learned from him, was that you got to ignore all of the BS and just focus on what's important and be unrelentingly focused on execution of everything you do. And so that really, when you were going through for 5 years, and you have that beaten into you so much, you kind of start to acquire that from him. And, a lot of my success is attributable to those habits that I learned under him. And then, as I got out and I played in the NFL for 2 years, played for the Colts. And then, as I went into business, he always kept up with me. I talked to him every couple months, and he was always late at night, be like for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And he really did want to know, what I was up to, what my teammates were up to, what was going on, and the conversation would go 100 different directions.
Yeah.
He was a fascinating guy. Never met anybody like him. I miss him, through this work I've been doing in college sports. I've thought many times about how I wish he was around, because his perspective would be so off the wall, but so correct.
Yeah.
He would be able to help us find a solution.
Art Briles, you played for him too. In fact, I think initially we kind of met because and everybody knows this, I'm skeptical oftentimes of the consensus media narrative, whether it's in sports or anything else. I like to meet people. What was Art Briles like, part one? Part two, you're a Texas guy, football guy. Why do you think Texas in general, high school, has been so open to changing and experimentation and evolution of the game itself? Because interestingly, a lot of what we see that's very standard now came out of the Mike Leaches and Art Briles, but also out of the Texas high school football ecosystem. So
I played my last high school game against Coach Briles when he was still the high school coach at Stephenville. We played him in the quarterfinals at the old Texas Stadium where the Cowboys used to play.
Yep.
And my high school at the time, we threw the ball about 5 or 6 times a game.
You were grounded pound.
Yeah, we ran that power eye.
Yeah.
And everybody that we played all year ran the power eye or the wishbone or whatever. We go to play Stephenville in the playoffs, and it's like the first time we'd ever seen a forward pass. It was insane.
Yeah.
And all we knew how to do was run cover 3.
Yep.
And so whichever guy our safety took, and Kendall Briles, his son, was the quarterback.
Yep.
Safety would take this guy, throw it to the other guy, and they just, now we played them tough, and we were a bunch of tough West Texas kids, but man, I mean, we didn't know what we were looking at. And so that was the first time I'd ever seen the spread offense. And he came up to me after the game and said, "You're a good player. Where are you going to play?" And like I was just saying, I hadn't taken any trips yet. I said, well, some coaches are here looking at me. I don't know yet. He said, well, good luck to you. And I said, well, good luck to you. So 2 weeks later, they won the state championship, and he got the running backs coach job at Texas Tech when Coach Leach got hired. And I got a phone call, landline at my house, and it was Coach Briles.
Yeah.
He asked me if I would come on a visit to Texas Tech. I said, sure. I've always wanted to play at Texas Tech. And so, went down there, and the staff had just come together, and it was Art Briles, Dana Holgerson was there, Sonny Dykes was there.
It's a fun group of dudes.
Dave Aranda was a GA on the defensive side. We had an incredible coaching staff, and, great experience, though. And Coach Briles, he's been a good friend of mine the whole time, and I haven't heard your stuff on his situation, but it's more complicated than people think. And,
I had a long form, and we should get all those long forms up on YouTube because everybody watches everything on YouTube now. But I would encourage y'all to check it out, because I think he is an example of someone where the media narrative was way outside the bounds of what the media story actually was, and we don't need to get into that right now. But we were talking before we started taping. My ninth grader played yesterday his football game. Your ninth grader is going to play later, the first game of his career. Why do you think football matters so much to so many young men? Before we get into what the future of college football should be, and how many of those young men do you think are going to have more successes in life than they would if they didn't have football and the coaching apparatus surrounding it?
Well, so I think kind of, wide angle kind of backing up first, you can look at American CEOs, and 60% of them have a college sports background. So that tells you something right there. There's something that's being developed inside of young people through sports. And I think that for me, with my son, what I like about it is just the opportunity, which doesn't exist very many places in our world today, which is an opportunity to do something hard. And to be challenged and to learn how to kind of dig deep and push yourself past a point that you knew you thought you could be pushed. And so for him, I just see it as an amazing character development opportunity. It was for me.
Yeah.
And so, I have different friends, some of my NFL friends and even some in college. It's like, I'm not going to have my son play football. I hurt from it and everything. And I'm like, man, all the pain that I have, which I do have some from my playing days, are 100% worth it, because again, I wouldn't be the person that I am today without it. There's no doubt about it, and wouldn't have the success that I have and have had, and wouldn't have the, kind of character that I have if it weren't for it. And the people that I met, the coaches I got to have exposure to, the friendships that I made. The thing is, I really think it's a cultural fixture, football is, in this country. And it's one of the last remaining places where we really celebrate masculinity.
Yep.
We celebrate meritocracy. I mean, sports are the ultimate meritocracy. And, making sure that remains inside of higher education, I think, is really important. But also maintaining it as part of our culture is really important. And I think it's the one thing that, wherever you are in the political spectrum, people love it and they can come together around it. It's high school football, especially in Texas, in a lot of states, is super important to communities, small towns across the country that a lot of people have never seen or gone to. College football, to bigger places and small towns alike, is the center of everything. And so, it's people care about it, they love it, they have great passion for it, and it elicits certain feelings in us that we really don't have for other things. And I don't know what it is about the sport that does that, but it sure does.
When did you know your NFL career was not going to pan out, and that it was time to find something else to do? Was there a moment you had?
There was a very specific moment when I tore my pec, and so.
Was that during practice or was that a lift?
Yeah, it was during practice.
And you knew instantly, you were like, oh no, this is.
I mean, it was the most pain I'd ever been in my life, and for an offensive lineman, that's a pretty bad injury.
Yeah.
And maybe it's gotten better now and they can fix them, but at that time it was pretty catastrophic, and I felt it go, and I knew what it was because I knew other people who had it happen to them, and it was it ended pretty quickly.
Okay, so you have that moment. You have to go through the rehab, which I'm sure the pain on that is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But you start to decide, okay, it's time to make a living doing something else. You're from Texas. Did you know instinctively, hey, it's going to be oil and gas? I know you did real estate, if I'm not mistaken. How did you determine, hey, okay, now it's time to turn the page. I'm going to do something else?
Yeah, so I started a little real estate business when I was in college.
Yeah.
With a couple of friends.
And that real estate business would have done what?
Well, the first things we did was we somehow cobbled together money from friends and family and bought a piece of land and built out lots that builders bought from us, home builders bought from us.
In the Lubbock area?
In Lubbock,
yeah. Okay.
And so, and that, it wasn't much of a business, but I learned a lot through that. Went to the NFL and left that business when I went to the NFL because the thought was I wasn't going to have time to do it anymore. But I went to the NFL and realized that you actually have a lot of time. You get up there at like 6 and then you're done at like lunch.
Yeah. And
so I started working on some real estate projects while I was still playing. I met some people in Indianapolis. After I got cut, one of the guys that I'd met offered me a job. And so I went to work for a Indianapolis real estate developer, but was working all across the country. My undergraduate degree was in finance, and I got a master's degree in finance as well while I was still at Texas Tech. And so I had that background and was able to, fit right into a real estate company, but got to go all over the country doing really cool projects and learned a lot. But then 08 came around, and
not a good time to be in the real estate business.
No, but I can tell you I learned more from the financial crisis than I learned, in the years before that. Learned what can go wrong if you have too much leverage, what can go wrong.
It's the great line. I'm sure you've heard it, Warren Buffett saying, until the tide goes out, you can't tell who's got a bathing suit on and who doesn't, right?
That's right. Yeah,
and then right. 08, the tide was out. Mm-hmm. So you either had the ability to run a business or you didn't.
Yeah, and so I was, one of the last people left at that company, and, and because I was a young guy and dealt with a lot of problems, but I learned a whole lot, and eventually got into oil and gas just because I kind of had to. I'd just gotten married. I needed to make a living, and so I called my old friend John Sellers that I'd started the real estate company with in college. I grew up with him.
Yeah.
He and I played football at Texas Tech together, and I was like, "Man, what are you doing?" He's like, "Dude, I'm still in real estate, and it's horrible." And I said, "Yeah, me too." Yeah. But we had grown up and gone to college with a bunch of people who were in the oil and gas business.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, oil and gas is real estate, and so we kind of knew how to do those transactions. And so we just made those contacts and went out, started in Louisiana, and had no knowledge of geology or where areas are good or what's prospective. But I went in the courthouse and just figured out where the big companies were leasing.
Yeah.
And then, we're good enough at getting deals done that we went out and found those people and got the little pieces.
So this is a landman style thing where you go into different properties that are not signed.
Yep.
And you just start persuading people, hey, let me have a lease on your property. You started in Louisiana.
I started in Louisiana because that was the hot play at the time.
Yeah.
It was the Haynesville Shale. And so we were able to cobble some stuff together and sell a few of the deals. Went to South Texas, kept doing the same thing, kind of went back to our roots about the same time in West Texas, and the Permian was starting to take off. And you kind of went from there. We eventually started our own operating company, hired the people that knew how to drill wells and complete them. Built it up and, got private equity partners, after a few years, and ended up, now we've built and sold 7 different private equity backed companies for over $15 billion total. So
was there a deal that you did where you thought, hey, I finally made it, and or one where you thought, I don't know how this is going to go, because it's a probability business, I imagine, all the time, where you're like, hey, if this hits, we're cooking. If this misses, I know you're trying to leverage it so you never have all your chips, I would imagine, in at one place. But I don't know this business well. I'm just kind of curious.
So now we do it to where we don't have all our chips on the table.
But when you're starting, you had to have some chips on the table.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So the point I can remember very vividly is we had been going for a little while, and we'd made $1 million. And I was like, wow.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
We're in good shape.
Yeah.
How
are you ever going to spend $1 million, right? A lot of people think that.
And my partner, John, called me. He's more of a risk taker than I am, which is good.
Yeah.
But he called and he said, all right, there's a deal we need to buy. And he said, it's $1 million.
So all in.
Yeah, we're going all in. And
are you married at the time?
Oh yeah.
So do you tell how does that conversation go?
I really, in the early days, didn't tell her about.
You didn't get involved in the
individual? Because I didn't want her to be stressed by it.
Yeah.
Let me handle that. You know? And so she trusted me, and we have a great marriage, and she trusts I'm going to make the right decision.
So when you put the $1 million in, like you're like going all in, what in your head probabilistically did you think in terms of the likelihood of success?
I was too dumb and inexperienced to know how risky it was. But part of that is that when you don't have any other choice but to make it work, you kind of figure things out.
Yeah.
So that one worked out. And then we had to do it a few more times.
And $1 million all in, what would work out look like? It comes back at what kind of return?
I can't remember on that one, but you might, if you buy and lease right, you might double your money or triple it.
Yeah.
And when it's not so much that way anymore, but back, 15 years ago, whenever the shale plays were really taking off, the cost of the land would go from overnight from $500 an acre to $25,000 an acre.
Yeah.
And so if you were really good and nimble, you could go out and put these things together and make big multiples sometimes on leases. But these days, it's much more of a known commodity, and so there's much more efficiency in the market. And so there isn't as much sneaking up on anybody.
Yeah.
Back in it was kind of Wild West days, and we were well equipped, in our.
By the way, this is not that long ago, just like 15 years ago or so.
Yeah, we were 27, 28 years old.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of energy, and again, we're too dumb to know how much risk we were taking.
Yeah.
So we just got after it and again, just figured it out as we went along.
So at what point, I got asked this question, I think it's always an interesting one. Did you think, okay, we've made it as a business where you're now maybe not willing to take the all, maybe you still are, I don't know. Some guys are always willing to push the chips in.
No.
But at what point did you think, hey, we've got a stable business, we can, manage risk better?
Well, we typically build the businesses up and sell them.
Yeah.
So after each, sale,
you had more cash to operate
right. And
with.
so I had learned enough during the whole 2008 thing, during the financial crisis, that I knew that you needed to be really careful about borrowing money, especially, but you always had to, you never wanted to be in a position where you were just completely vulnerable to the markets. And so we've always been pretty smart about and we both experienced that. So we've always been pretty smart about making sure that, while we had to take risk in the early days, as we didn't have to necessarily to keep the business going, we didn't. And so we're careful about thinking about that and finding ways to leverage our own capital and, try to keep risk away from ourselves.
What happens, you talked about 2008 in real estate. What happens in 2020 when suddenly the price of a barrel of oil basically vanishes? Did your business, I'm curious, was that an 2008 moment like for you, or what did that feel like?
Yeah, it was a pretty pivotal moment for a business that we had at the time. We had a company in the Permian called Double Eagle Energy Holdings 3, and we had a pretty large acreage position that was very high quality. And we had, financial partners all over the country. People were going through a lot of different things at that time.
Yeah.
We had a lot of diverging views on what we should do. But what John and I decided to do at that time was, oil went to negative $35 a barrel.
I remember.
So you literally technically had to pay somebody to take your production. But what we thought we understood at that time was that this is a great opportunity. Like, we've seen stuff like this before. This is when you actually lean in. This isn't when you run scared. And so we kept all our rigs running. We had maintained a solid balance sheet, and so we were prepared. We had a lot of hedges. We were prepared to. We said, look, we knew the downturn was coming. It's a cyclical business.
Yeah.
We didn't know it was going to be caused by a pandemic, but we knew it was going to happen. So we were prepared for this, and we had a plan going in, and so we're going to execute on it. And so we bought a bunch of stuff. We drilled a bunch of wells for really cheap. They're probably the highest return wells we've ever drilled because they were so cheap. And we ended up that following spring. That's right. Selling that business for $6.4 billion.
$6.4 billion. Yeah. All right. So that's an amazing story. You remember your first $1 million. This all comes together pretty quickly. You named, if I'm correct, your business is a version of Double Eagle. Mm-hmm. Where did that name come from?
Well, there are two of us, and we're both from Canyon, Texas, and we were the Canyon Eagles, and so called it Double Eagle. If we had known it was going to be successful, we probably would have come up with a better name, but it's worked out.
So what iteration are you on now? Do you still have an oil and gas company?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are Double Eagle Energy Holdings 5 that we're on.
You've sold 4 so far?
We've actually sold
seven, I think you
because
said.
we have another company called Tumbleweed Royalty that we've sold a few versions of.
Yeah.
And then we have a lot of other business we're involved in now, in different industries and other parts of oil and gas and back some real estate and, all different kinds of things we're involved with.
Okay. Now, I'm fascinated on all of that. But I want to now go into college football for a sec, because this is what gives you the opportunity to be able to have an impact at Texas Tech in the way that you have, across multiple different sort of sports, right? And we'll get into that a little bit now too. So let's start with this. If I gave you a magic wand and I said, Cody, you've been wildly successful in oil and gas. You're one of the biggest boosters. You're working with President Trump, which I'm going to get to in a moment and talk about him some. But let's just start big picture. I give you a magic wand and I say, you are the grand poobah of college athletics. What should the system look like in your mind on a broad level at the top?
Well, I think I'd have to back up a little bit first
and
kind of explain, because I don't know that people generally understand how the business of college athletics work.
Yeah.
And I've had a pretty good opportunity to be in a front row seat and be very involved with one university. And so I've learned a lot over the last few years. So I joined the Board of Regents at Texas Tech 4 years ago. Governor Abbott appointed me to that position. At state universities in Texas, the governor has to appoint you to the board.
Yep.
So I got on there and had been involved in the athletic department for a while. Prior to that, pretty heavily as a donor and then, in different roles. But got super plugged into it when I became a regent. And then about the time I joined the board was when Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12 or announced they were leaving the Big 12. And so got thrown into the fire kind of at that time, in trying to understand just what's going on.
Yeah.
Because it completely took everyone in the conference by surprise. It was, to their credit, those guys really executed their plan.
I was stunned they kept it as quiet as they did.
Too.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of figuring out to do very quickly. And then, kind of examining what's wrong and why are they doing this? And, how do we position ourselves better to do better in future realignments? And just thinking through those like business related problems that I've been, and it's similar, there's a similar lens to the way I look at our oil and gas business. And then, the changes started to occur. There were court cases, there were state law changes that caused this NIL era to start. The first, California is the one that kicked it off. In the summer of 2021, when they changed their state law where players could now be paid for their name, image, and likeness. And then there was a court case, Alston versus NCAA. And it was a 9-0 decision. And the court, it was a pretty narrow decision. It was based on a academic aid, like, special academic awards that kids can get. But the Supreme Court was really, really clear. And they said that the NCAA has been acting in violation of antitrust law basically for its entire history.
Yeah, and for people out there who, this is getting into the weeds, and this is where I'll put my law hat on, basically the only way you can restrict player compensation is through, historically, a collective bargaining agreement. And for people out there that don't know, otherwise all salary restraints are restraints of trade. There is a collective bargaining exemption. So if a players union typically negotiates with teams and a business entity, NFL, NBA, NHL, then you can have a restriction. What usually happens is the very apex top talent makes a little bit less than they otherwise would, maybe substantially less on a fully open marketplace. The floor gets raised substantially. So as a result, the union as a whole decides they're going to bargain. There is no union. And so any restraint of trade on player compensation, basically, as you just said, is by its nature an antitrust violation, which is what really kind of set off this entire movement and so much change.
Yeah, that's basically what the court said, is that the schools and conferences have been colluding with each other for years against the athletes.
Basically their entire history.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so, I think legally and technically the court's right.
Yeah.
I don't really have any good argument against them. And again, it was a 9-0 decision.
Yep.
It was the decision, the author of the decision was Gorsuch, and then Kavanaugh consented with it. Kavanaugh just rips the NCAA apart.
Yes.
In the thing. And
it's
so,
worth reading if you're interested in this conversation. Go read the opinion for yourself.
Yeah. So it's, it's valid, legally. And that set off a chain reaction of events that has led us to where we are today. But in the summer of 21, I wasn't really focused on the bigger picture. I was like trying to figure out how
do you save Texas Tech athletics?
Texas Tech. And so we started an NIL collective, my business partner and I and some other guys. And Texas Tech is very fortunate, just like we are, to be in the largest oil field in the world. And so we have a lot of donors, myself included, who have done really well out there.
Yeah.
And so we were able to raise a huge amount of money. And, a lot of oil guys love football and they love giving money to football teams. And so it's a dynamic that plays in our favor. And so we started it, relatively modestly. And I really wanted it to be something that was good for the athletes. I didn't think that it made sense in a college locker room for one guy to be making $1 million and another guy to be making nothing. And so our collective was one of the only ones that was set up this way, where we paid every single player on the roster $25,000, 105 players, all walk-ons included. And that was our original model, and that was good. And I think it really helped build the culture. But as we progressed, it became more and more clear that this was turning into a professionalized environment. And as other decisions came down and the transfer portal opened up, that changed things. Like another year later, players can move around freely. Yep. You have to compete in order to keep your existing roster, and then you have opportunity to go get players from other teams. And so you need to probably take advantage of that opportunity. And so it became just very chaotic. But, again, like I described in the early shale play days, what I've always found is that there's opportunity in chaos.
And chaos is a ladder, as they said in Game of Thrones, which is a great line.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And it's true. When people are scared and they don't know what's going on, just like during COVID, that's the time when you go.
I made a lot less than you, but the reason OutKick took off was we expanded in 2020 when every other sports media company was firing people. We said, hey, I'm investing. I'm going to spend money. We got to bring sports back. And turns out we were right on most of those things. But also when everybody else ran away from growth, we embraced it in a similar way when you were talking about how you guys doubled and tripled down when everybody else was worried about the price of oil and gas. Yeah. So to your point, 2021, you're way ahead of the curve in terms of what you guys are doing. The curve sort of adjusts. And so as each of these stair step happens, now the policy is different. And I assume you're still paying everybody on the roster, but now some guys are making over $1 million a year and other guys are making much less.
So in total, the history of our collective, we raised over $63 million, which I think is the most in the country. And, this last cycle, we had the number one transfer class in the country.
Yeah.
And we really hit it hard. We attacked it. We saw that there was this window of opportunity. So another court case was coming down called House v. NCAA.
Yes.
And House is a class action lawsuit that was brought in California in 2020 that had been working its way through the courts and through some kind of settlement process for years. But we'd been following it closely and understood what the implications of it were, which was that the players were going to start getting paid directly from the athletic departments.
Right. $20.5 million is that
per
number,
year. Yeah. And so that, so we had the transfer portal period in December. We felt like the settlement was kind of going to be finalized sometime after that.
Yep.
And so there's this window where you could still use NIL collective money, but you can also use this revenue sharing money.
That's right.
And so we doubled down and really leaned on our alumni and our boosters and just said, look, this is a unique opportunity for Texas Tech. We need to go out and get as much money put together as we possibly can, because this is probably the last window we're going to have to do it like this. Nobody else knows what's going on. We understand it better than other people do. And we ended up being right. And we ended up being more right than I thought that we would be. And so, we'll see how it comes together this fall. But, we should have a pretty good team as a result of, basically being able to completely flip our roster.
I got a couple of things to hit here. One, I think I have seen Texas Tech did not have a great offensive line performance. You're an offensive lineman from Texas Tech. I'm sure that offensive line failure bothers you more than most.
It does.
and you hopped on social media and said what? This went mega viral in the Texas Tech community.
So this guy tweeted at me after the Colorado game that we had lost, and we took him down to the wire and lost at home. And I don't know why you want to blame a booster at the end of a game. He did. And he said, can you say bad words on here?
You can say whatever the hell you want, trust me.
He said, why don't you buy us a better online, bitch? And I just replied.
Like he tagged you directly.
Yeah.
Who has put millions of dollars, who gave your heart and soul for 4 years to bust your ass on the team. The team loses a game. You're 40-ish, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and he comes onto social media and says, why don't you buy us some better players, bitch, to you.
Yeah.
And so what?
Online, I just replied, I will. I was just being, I didn't think that but it went viral, and our fan base kind of latched onto it, and they printed shirts and everything. And so and so again, we went into this transfer period and everything. It was kind of the rallying cry for our fan base, and we.
I love that. Let me take a step back. What does watching a Texas Tech football game with you? What is it like? What is the experience? Are you in the crowd? Are you in a suite? Are you a cursor? Are you a yeller? Are you calm? Are you like, how do you watch a typical Texas Tech?
So I'm in a suite. But I don't say a whole lot. I'm not, I'm there to watch football.
Yeah.
I watch the line, and I want to deeply understand what's going on.
You'd put a headset on and listen to the play calls if you could.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I probably could, but I don't take it that far. But
you want,
I'm really
locked
into
and loaded.
It. Yeah. And so when other people are drinking and talking to me and stuff, I really just want to watch the game. And so that's more or less how I am. But my kids love it now. My wife understands that she's into the game. So we're always there as a family.
So if Texas Tech loses a game, do you have trouble sleeping that night if they lose a game that you think Texas Tech should have won?
Yeah. It's no different than when I was playing. I still feel it pretty deeply and wanting to win. And that's, like I said, football elicits emotions that are hard to understand, to be honest with you.
I jotted this down because I'm not proud of it all the time. I'm super optimistic in life. If I have anything to do with anything, like I am super. I jotted this down on the way here because I was thinking about it. I was curious what kind of viewer you are of the game. I'm super pessimistic about things that other people control. So I don't know what that says about me, but I am always expecting the rug to get yanked out from my team, that they're going to make a decision that I don't agree with, that somebody's going to. But so I don't know what that says about me. If I'm involved, like I'm like, hey, this interview is going to go perfect.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here, I'm talking to Cody. I'm not worried about that at all. Tomorrow, when I'm watching Tennessee play against Syracuse, there is inevitably going to be a point during the game where I'm going to think there's no way we win this football game.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's different than when I wasn't a very good athlete necessarily, but when I played, I expected that we were going to win all the time. But if I can't control it, but this for you allows you to have some say in the outcome in a way beyond what a traditional booster would have been able to, or a former athlete, if it's not coaching. Otherwise, this is pretty connected.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people about one of the positives of NIL is that instead of just sitting in the stands and being mad about it, you can actually do something about it. So you can help your school, help your team. And so, I've encouraged people to, instead of, tweeting at me or, saying ugly things, all right, just give some money to the Matador Club and we'll go try to work on it. So, but it's actually been a lot of fun. It's been really interesting. But through all of that, in that experience that I've had and just following so closely and understanding it intricately, and strategizing and, trying to figure out how all the pieces fit together, I started to understand the larger problem that we have. And my concern about it shifted from, all right, what's going on with Texas Tech and how do we properly position them, to, oh my God, this is an incredible institution that we have in college athletics, and we really are about to lose it. And the more data I gathered and the more I learned, the more apparent that became to me.
When you say lose it, what does losing it look like in your mind?
College sports going away.
Meaning that basically these just become minor league professional franchises?
Yeah. And, that would be a horrible tragedy on many levels. But probably the largest one would be that there are 500,000 student athletes in the country. I know for me, for many of my teammates, having that opportunity to education and social mobility is a life-changing thing. So many guys I played with, their only opportunity to get out of really bad home situations was that chance to play sports.
That's right.
And, and then we house our entire Olympic development program inside of intercollegiate athletics. We're the only country in the world that does that. Everybody else has state-sponsored Olympic development systems. We have it all in college. We don't have an Olympic program anymore if we don't have college sports. The opportunities for women that it provides, and I didn't realize this until I got into the data, but the percentage of women that play sports and then go on to be in C-level positions,
yep.
It's dramatically higher among female athletes than it is those that don't have an athletic background. And again, just opportunity. And you can like Title IX or dislike Title IX, but you have to recognize the fact that it has done a lot for women throughout its history. It's again, opportunity for education, and just the same thing it does for men, as it should. And what I recognized was that if we professionalize it, the first thing that's going to be cut are the women's sports and the Olympic sports. Because I think the thing that's not commonly understood in athletics is that, number one, money isn't just falling out of the trees. They, on average, across the FBS, schools spend about $20 million per year more than they make.
Yeah.
When you look at Power 4 even, so there are 54 Power 4 schools that actually have to publicly report their financial data. 37 of those Power 4 schools lost money in 2024, and that's before the House settlement came in that's going to add another $20 million per year on top of it. And so you have schools like Alabama running a massive deficit, which you'd never expect, Ohio State running a massive deficit. And so in order to bridge that gap, what schools have to do, they have basically two choices. They can divert academic funds into athletics, which is not ideal. That's not what they're supposed to be used for. Or they can charge a student fee. They charge the students a few $100 a year, which we shouldn't be putting this on the back of students, in order to bridge that gap. Now, for colleges, it's an existential thing. You have to do it. As people say, it's the front porch of the university. And colleges and universities across the country are having a lot of trouble right now. Undergraduate enrollment is down 15% roughly over the last 10 years, and that crushes the business of higher education. But the one thing that drives higher enrollment is exposure through sports. So during this period of time where enrollment's down nationally, every single one of the SEC schools has increased their enrollment.
Yeah.
During the time that Nick Saban was the coach at Alabama, Alabama's enrollment increased by 70%.
This is, I think, probably the most undertold aspect of the Nick Saban story.
Absolutely.
His impact in football is great.
Mm-hmm.
What he did for the University of Alabama, the example I give is when I was a kid growing up in Nashville, you had to have a pulse to get into the University of Tennessee. It was not hard to get in at all. Tennessee has a 38% approval rating, acceptance rate right now. Yeah. And all these different schools now, it's not only Alabama that he created this entire demand for. Kids growing up in L.A. and New York City and Chicago right now, rich kids want to go to the South to go to schools because
it looks like fun on TV, right?
Because of college football to a large extent and college basketball. And so, yes, the culture. Let me ask you this question. So you guys, I think you said 64 million ish, 63 or 64 million you raise. One thing that I've expected to happen is, and it hasn't happened yet, and maybe it won't happen with the House settlement and the $20.5 million, is if the Elon Musk fan of college football, somebody who's worth hundreds of billions of dollars, just decided, hey, I want to endow my favorite school, like Tim Cook as an example.
Yeah.
I don't think Tim Cook has kids. Apple CEO, for those of you who don't know, he's an Auburn guy. If Tim Cook just decided, you know what, I never want to lose another recruit to Alabama for the rest of life. There is no Tim Cook of Alabama, right? So whoever happens to have guys like you who have been very successful, who have a lot of funds, have an ability to raise money on NIL. I actually think this is one reason Nick Saban dropped out at Alabama. I think he looked around, he said, we don't have Texas money. We don't have Texas Tech money. We don't have A&M money. We don't have even Tennessee money. A lot of billionaires pouring money in there. The Walmart family at Arkansas, right? In Missouri. There's so much money out there. At some point, one of the flaws of non-salary cap sports is the richest guy buys the best talent, and the overall sport is not as successful because the business of athletics is a very strange business. It's actually the quality of competition that is the business, right? Whereas with what you did at Double Eagle, there's probably people you want to put out of business in the oil and gas business. Walmart definitely wants to put Target out of business.
Yeah.
If Alabama actually puts Auburn out of business, it's bad for the sport because the rivalry and the competition and not knowing who might win is actually the business. So if the money comes in and there's too many billionaires or there's too many 100 billionaires that decide to buy players, it could actually destroy the fabric of the business too, even if they don't go pro as businesses. Does that make sense? That's one of the things I worry about.
It does. And I think that, even before you get to the boosters, and some schools do have really good boosters. And so they're able to be more sustainable with what they do because they can get booster money from it. But those are the very small minority.
And that's somewhat arbitrary too,
Yeah,
right? Because you just happen to have a guy who ends up being a billionaire and wants to care that much about the program like you. You might have ended up, if Texas Tech doesn't give you a scholarship, you might have ended up going to any number of other schools and love those schools as much.
So here's the real threat to college athletics when you talk about the business of it is that if you don't have some source of revenue for it, and I would say that, about 80% to 90% of, if even big schools are in this situation, you're kind of in trouble because about 3/4 to 80% of your revenue comes from football in an athletic department. 15 to 20% comes from men's basketball, and this is at the top line.
Yep.
Women's basketball is like 4%, and then the other sports are nothing. The only sports that are in the black that actually make money are football and men's basketball.
That's right.
The money that is made from football and men's basketball goes to fund all the other sports.
That's right.
So the women's sports, the Olympic sports, volleyball, tennis, track and field.
To your point, if you were only running college sports as a business, you would basically only do football and men's basketball.
That's right.
Maybe a little bit of women's basketball for some.
I don't know.
Only for like the UConns and the Tennessees and maybe the South Carolinas of the world, right?
But it's not really going to exist on a large scale.
And so therefore, to your point, and I don't think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about it, purely from a business perspective, the vast majority of college sports would not exist.
That's exactly right. And because of the legal environment we live in, that problem has been magnified. So the only sports that really get exposure on TV are football and men's basketball.
Yeah.
Right. So there is a lot of appetite for women's basketball right now, but it's not really shown because the media companies essentially choose which games they're going to show and which ones they're not going to show. Because they own the media rights to the whole athletic department. They don't just own football and basketball. And so, you might get a softball game on ESPN Plus here and there. And people love softball. They like to watch it. They're interested in it.
It's fabulous television product.
It is. People love college baseball, but it doesn't really get shown that much. And so it loses money. And so we're kind of trapped in this environment where we can't fully monetize our product.
Yeah.
But at the same time, more and more expenses are getting lumped on top of the athletic department. So I believe it's the right thing to pay the players. I do think they bring a lot of value. They clearly do. And like I said, I agreed with the court decision. But the problem is we have this semi-professionalized situation where we have a system that is set up to run a certain way where, a limited amount of revenue funds everything. And now we have basically unlimited expenses.
Yeah.
And that's not
a good combo, by the way.
And so what schools are deciding to do, especially this post-house settlement, post this new salary cap, July 1st, is that, they're looking at the business of the sport and they're saying exactly what you just said, which is, look, we need to cut the non-revenue sports. We need to cut the women's sports. We need to cut the Olympic sports and focus on where we make our money, which is football and men's basketball. So that's pretty much all.
Which is, by the way, if you strip away the college angle of it, is what most business does, right?
That's right.
Any business somebody's running out there, they go look at the spreadsheets and they say, hey, this is where the profit is. We put more resources here. This is where we're not making money. Let's dial back resources here.
It's a logical business decision. Yeah. And so if it becomes a business, it's a business. And so the parts of it that aren't making money go away. And so that is what has started to happen. So since July the 1st, since the House settlement kicked in, 182 sports have been cut at colleges across the country. And so the president became aware of this. He's a big advocate for women's sports.
So let me pause you right here. How did you first meet President Trump?
I have known him since his first term in office. Yeah. And got to know quite a few people in the administration. I was after his first term ended, I was a founding member of America First Policy Institute. And so, and a lot of folks from that group have gone into the administration. So had a lot of relationships there. And, I wouldn't say that he and I are close, but it's gotten where people around him and he, listen to me and we know each other.
Most people are not going to ever get to meet any president, much less President Trump. How would you describe him? You've been in athletics your whole life.
Yeah.
You've met a lot of different people. For people who will not have the opportunity to meet President Trump, how has he been personally in terms of just being around the president? How would you describe him?
I wish that people could see that part of him. He's an extremely nice guy.
Yeah. I think that's what surprises people, by the way.
And he's kind to people. He's thoughtful. He's not at all what you expect. He has a character and he has a toughness about him, and that appeals to a lot of people, and that's at his core. But interpersonally and with the way he treats people, he's very kind and he's very friendly. He's very likable.
Yes.
And he's a unique person. He's off the charts intelligent. He has a million things going on every day.
Yes.
And my typical interaction with him is very short, and you have to be very to the point because he doesn't have time. He listens and absorbs everything you tell him the first time around, and he gets it. And he not only understands the basic point, but the implications of that point, and then will come up with a solution immediately thereafter that's right most of the time. And so he's pretty fascinating. It's not surprising at all that he was successful in business. I mean, and I think he uses that same mindset to apply to how he makes decisions. He's a phenomenal person, and watching him and thinking about him being 79 years old or whatever, it's unfathomable.
Yes.
He doesn't look like it. He looks like he's in his early 60s. He definitely doesn't act like it. And I cannot imagine keeping his schedule or doing the things. And I'm a busy guy, but doing the things he does every single day and not just falling over.
Yeah.
I don't know how somebody does it at any age. But
it is, I think, under-discussed far too. We talk about it far too little. The number of people who would be able to keep just his schedule up.
There's no way.
Of any age.
Yeah.
And the way I would describe him too is everyone who meets him, it's one of the biggest moments of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Meeting the president, for most people, if you ever have the good fortune to do it, is a moment you will remember for the rest of your life. He has the energy to do that with people on what I think is frankly an unprecedented level. There was an analogy, Broadway performers, the ones who are truly great at it, actors, musicians, I think too, they perform every time as if it's both their first and their last show. Mm-hmm. The energy that they put out, you can feel in the crowd. That's him.
Yep.
I mean, he really is able to get that. Okay, so you have gotten to know him in the context of college athletics in particular. What is your title and what has your role been so far as it pertains to this issue?
So I started working with them in December during the transition period.
Yep.
And this was an area that I felt like I understood well. I was in a position to, potentially do different things in the administration or, help. And I wanted to help. And, I feel like, a person who's gotten to the place that I have in life should give back.
Yes.
And so I felt like this was an opportunity for me to give back because it was a problem that I knew existed and a problem that I felt like I knew how to fix. And so I leveraged the relationships that I had and the contacts and my own resources and started essentially building a policy platform that I could work with them on and explain to them and try to get them interested in. And so we started doing that in December and then talked to them all throughout, have been talking to them since then. And then the days are kind of long and so are the weeks right now. But several weeks ago, I was actually appointed to a position on the President's Council for Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, which makes me a special government employee and now have a actual role with them on this topic on college sports.
One of the things I talk to guys who are in business and decide like you did, hey, I've had some success, I want to give back, is the great thing about being a CEO or a high-ranking business person inside of a company, you can say, hey, we're going to fix this.
Yeah.
This is broken. Let's go solve it. I think you could see with Elon, he sees what's broken in the government, at Tesla, at SpaceX, at the Boring Company, whatever thing he's running, he looks at it and he says, okay, this is broken. We're going to fix it. When I talk to people, they say it's really frustrating about government is hey, it's broken and you want to fix it, and there isn't very much ability necessarily to rapidly fix it. Has that been your experience? I know that's Trump is trying, it feels like, at many times to just fix every problem under the sun in a relatively short amount of time. How do you fix college athletics within the prism of government?
So yeah, that process has been very frustrating.
Yeah.
Until you go to DC and you start meeting on the Hill and you start talking to people, you don't really understand how bad it is. But as bad as anyone says it is, it's worse.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people there that don't really understand what they're doing or what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And they are responsible for really big issues.
Yes.
And they're flying completely blind. And that's frightening.
By the way, I came from sports and started when Rush died. Buck and I started doing that. So I spend maybe more time on the politics side now than I used to. When I started, I expected way more competence than I have found.
Yeah.
Take away the Democrat, Republican, Independent. The number of people who actually understand, oftentimes, the issues that they are supposed to understand well, it's actually kind of startling how bad it is.
It is. Now, there are some really, really smart people.
Yes.
And some exceptional people.
Yes.
And you kind of have to find those and work with them.
And then, by the way, a lot of people don't even want to do anything.
That's right. A lot of people are just really
happy to get the check
position.
and just want the
they
position
want
and the status,
attention, and they want to be a retail politician. They want to be at events, and there are a few that actually are focused on good policy and are really, really smart.
Yeah.
And the thing I would reassure people about, especially with the Trump administration, is that he has gathered an exceptionally large number of those people and put them all together.
Yeah.
And so that's what's exciting about going in there with them, is that like you actually get smart people that you can work with. It's not that way down the street.
So what does a smart solution look like to you in college athletics?
So we've said it's a three-legged stool. So there are three things that have to be addressed. Number one is that we have to resolve this legal quagmire that we're in. As you mentioned, it can be done through the collective bargaining.
Yep.
But if the players are going to collective bargain, that means that they have to become employees and they probably have to unionize, and
which has its own complexities.
It has its own complexities, and it's probably not good for the sport. It's probably not good for the kids even. And I know it's not good for the kids from a tax standpoint. They starting to get taxed on their scholarships and everything else. So I don't think that's what they are really going to end up wanting, and I don't think that's what the best solution is. But we have to resolve that issue. So the way you resolve the legal issue, the antitrust issue, is that some entity has to be given an antitrust exemption.
That's right.
Right? So Major League Baseball is the only sport, I guess, that has an antitrust exemption. The other sports were never given one. They had to work it out through collective bargaining. So it's there is precedent for it, but not much.
And sorry to cut you off, but they are working on an act, and I don't know if Congress will pass it,
called the
Score Act.
Yeah.
That would, in theory, provide antitrust exemption that would allow this legal quagmire in some way to potentially end.
So the Score Act is very focused on the legal part.
Yes.
So antitrust exemption, it establishes the student athletes are not employees, and then it provides for preemption of the state laws. So right now we have 39 different state laws that govern college athletics, and so they're all in conflict with one another.
That's right.
And it's a huge mess.
Yes.
And it's been a race to the bottom. So one state passed a law. Tennessee's been leading the way.
I know.
One state passed another law to give their schools a short-term advantage, and the other states all mirror it. And it's just gotten less and less. There's less and less governance over the sport.
And it's, by the way, super complicated because it could lead, let me give you just an example, to a high school kid in a state can start being paid NIL money if, for instance, he goes in some states to a state institution.
Yeah.
But if he leaves the state, he's not allowed to be paid. Well, you could see how that you would.
No, it's a complete mess, and each state has different complications.
Yeah, that's right.
And the implications of all that are that there is no ability of any governing body, whether it's NCAA or any conference, to set or enforce any rules at all.
Yep.
So you can't. It's being fought all the time in courts, but technically, can they even enforce eligibility? Can a guy play till he's 30 years old in college?
It's an open question.
It's an open question. How much can you transfer? How much can you be paid? Who can pay you? Through what funds can be?
An easy example for people out there to think about is when you and I were younger, guys sued to get to the pros faster.
Mm-hmm.
Now guys sue to be able to stay in college athletics longer.
That's right.
I mean, that is a pretty dramatic paradigm shift in a relatively short period of time. So legal quagmire is point one.
The legal aspect is the first part. And like I said, the SCORE Act that's working its way through Congress does that. That's a bill that came out of Guest Bill Rock's office, has gone through 2 committee hearings, and it's probably going to get to the floor, this fall sometime.
One more thing that does is also address one of the things you're concerned about was it maintains a certain level of Olympic sport. I believe it's 16. Am I right about that?
The SCORE Act does not address that.
Oh, I thought it said 16.
So the president's executive order was the one that was really focused on maintaining the sport. So he came out a few weeks ago and issued an executive order that basically said no colleges can cut sports.
That's right.
And because after July 1st, like I said, there had been 182 of them cut. The ones that were cut under the executive order need to be reinstated. And but he had to do that in order to prevent the bleeding from continuing. And so it's a stopgap measure, but it needs to be codified through the legal process. The problem is the SCORE Act does not fully address the problem.
Okay.
So there are 2 other legs of the stool that have to be addressed in order to fully solve it. So, all right, so we resolve the legal issue, right, to some extent. But you say, all right, we're going to give an antitrust exemption. We're going to give great power to some entity to make and enforce rules. Who are you going to give it to?
Yeah.
That's a big question. So right now, it's not really even stated in the bill. It just says an intercollegiate athletics association, not necessarily the NCAA, but it could be the NCAA or it could be conferences. But you kind of generally get this antitrust exemption that's very not specific.
Okay.
That's not great. I think that everyone that's involved with college sports knows that the NCAA is broken.
Yes.
They not because of any individual action, but just because of the structure have caused these problems to occur. So, there are dozens of committees inside the NCAA that are responsible for rulemaking and enforcement. I've been quoted 90 separate committees, but that may be an erroneous number, but it's a lot. And so the Michigan sign stealing case just got resolved. All the coaches are already gone.
Yeah.
And they were slow to respond as the environment changed. It's a 120-year-old organization. It's just not working in the modern context, especially if you're talking about a sport that's become as professional.
Is this stool too, by the way, figuring out what the overarching organization
governance
is? Yeah.
How do you govern the sport? Who is responsible for it? Who is setting the rules? Is that governing body representative of the entire college sports world? Does it represent the small schools and the big schools? So one of the trends we've seen lately is that the power conferences, the Power Four, have taken over governance of college sports essentially.
Yeah.
I've come from a power conference school. I get it, but what I also know is that it crushes the G6.
Yeah, and by the way, on the $20.5 million, and I encourage you guys to go read these cases yourself because I love this stuff, and obviously, Cody, you love this stuff too. A lot of coaches I talk to say, without a governance structure that actually has the authority to levy penalty, and there is a penalty provision in here where if you're caught paying more than $20.5 million, they can restrict your funds. But I talk to a lot of coaches, and they say, we're going back to the carpet bag full of cash era where people are going to pay outside of the structure because they don't fear the penalty from the existing
everybody's looking
structure.
For ways to cheat because they don't feel like they can get penalized.
That's right.
Anymore. And so, and honestly, like that 20.5 is under the House settlement.
Yeah,
which is a settlement that can be challenged in different ways
and will be,
and through the legal system. But going back to the governance part of it, if we're going to set up a new entity and give it all this power, it really does need to represent everyone. It can't just represent Power 4 football, right? It's got to recognize that we have women and we have Olympians and we have all, and so everybody needs to have a seat at the table. The student athletes need to have a seat at the table. They never have before. Now, I have debated this a lot with people, what should it be actual current student athletes that are representing themselves at the NCAA or the new NCAA or whatever you want to call it. And my personal opinion is that we should do it like the Olympic Committee does, where there are athlete representatives, and the rule is they have to be 10 years out, but they're former athletes. And so, they have business experience or they
Yeah.
have, life experience.
Yeah.
And they can go in and represent the voices of the student athletes. Now, I'm really open to however anyone wants to do it, but I think it's really critical that the athletes have a voice, because that's fundamentally the problem, right? Is that we haven't listened to them forever. And so it finally got so bad and so egregious that the courts said, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You guys are taking advantage of these kids. And they were.
Yeah.
And it's because we just didn't listen to them. And so the NCAA became entirely focused on just basically punishing the kids all the time.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work. That's not fair.
So we got 3 prongs. We got legal quagmire, governance.
And then the third prong is the economic prong.
Yeah.
So like I mentioned before, everybody's losing money right now. Big schools, small schools. Yep. The Olympic sports and Olympic sports are at threat of being cut because to save money, there isn't enough money to sustain the system. And so this is where we get into sort of a complicated area of a business you understand well, which is media.
Yeah.
There's a thing called the Sports Broadcasting Act of 1961. And in 1961, the professional sports leagues, among other things, were given the rights to join together and pool their media rights and act as a single seller of those media rights. So the NFL goes and does, they're one negotiating unit, all 32 teams that go out and make their media deals. This is a monopoly power, so it gives them more ability to negotiate a better deal. It also gives them leverage to have more control over when their games are broadcast, what games are broadcast, and where and how. College has none of that. And so right now, when you look at the NBA, which has this protection under the Sports Broadcasting Act, they have half as many viewers as college football does, but they make twice as much money as college football does. That doesn't make any sense. And so what we've shown through study is that if we were to implement the Sports Broadcasting Act, we could add billions and billions of dollars a year to the system that the system deserves.
Yeah.
Secondly, we could allow a bigger platform for women's sports and Olympic sports. Like I said before, we could, if we have control of where those are broadcast and how they're broadcast, we can choose to put them on a higher pedestal so that more people can watch them, get interested in them, and they can build their fandom. And so that allows us to grow the enterprise.
Let me explain to people out there, because I think this is important. If you watch the NFL, for instance, the NFL has put together Monday Night Football package, pretty valuable. Thursday Night Football package, Christmas Day package, Fox, CBS, all of this different. I would encourage you to go look at I think it's 7 different outlets this coming year that are going to distribute the NFL, but it's sold in its totality. The Dallas Cowboys don't sell their rights by themselves. The AFC doesn't sell compared to the NFC. You don't break it down by division. This also comes out of a Supreme Court case, 1984, if I'm not mistaken, that the NCAA lost.
NCAA.
That's right.
Yeah, so Oklahoma and the University of Georgia sued the NCAA to basically be able to control their own media rights.
Yes.
That's what blew everything. That's where it all started.
And the media rights, instead of going to the NCAA, which controlled it as one entity at that time, it balkanized everything, and the conferences became powerful. So the SEC sells their media rights to ESPN through 2034, if I am remembering correctly. The Big Ten is primarily to Fox with the Big Ten Network and the big noon game often, but also is at CBS and NBC right now. The Big 12 is Fox and ESPN. Am I right about that, I think? And the ACC is all to ESPN. But those are the 4 major conferences are cut many different ways. But instead of, to your point, putting all 4 of those major conferences together and selling, then they're sold individually, which you think leads to a lower overall revenue than it would if you had a totality package.
It does, and it's for many reasons. It's not just that the media companies take advantage of it.
Yeah.
It's that we can't coordinate scheduling. So, there are weeks where there are no good games, and then there's a week where there are 3 really good Big Ten team games that are played at the same time, and so we cannibalize viewership all the time. We don't. The schedule isn't optimized at all, and so we're leaving so much commercial opportunity on.
Where do you draw the line? That's a question that I get asked. So in your world, is the Power 4 conference obviously has most of the viewership, but then also there's a lot of individual schools that are lower. There's also FCS. There's all these, and then college basketball is a different animal than college basketball for men and women is different. How do you see in your ideal world? Is it every package of college athletics sold as one entity? How is it structured? How is the pie cut up, for lack of a better way to describe it?
So I think there are 2 lenses you have to look at this from. Number one is a commercial lens, what makes actual sense, what's practical.
Yeah.
And then secondly, you have to look at their political lens, because if we're going to get any law passed, we have to get it passed through both houses of Congress. And so you have representatives that represent the whole country there.
Yeah.
And so if somebody who represents Washington State, for instance, which happened in Congress, before they went out of session, stands up and says, hey, this is bad for Washington State.
Yeah.
If
by the way, you're talking about the Washington State Cougars, not the whole state of Washington.
Yeah, the Washington State Cougars, yeah. So like they were essentially, this SCORE Act passes by itself without any kind of revenue opportunity along with it. We're just locking in these costs, and you're locking us into this cost, locking us out of every.
Yeah, Washington State and Oregon State, whatever you think of college athletics, were the biggest losers of the most recent line of realignment.
Yeah, they were. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And there are 70 G6 schools.
Yeah.
They outnumber the Power 4 schools, even though the Power 4 schools are the ones we pay attention to, especially the Big Ten and the SEC. But there are more of the others. And so if we're not thoughtful in how we do this, and we give too much power to college athletics in the wrong way, you're going to end up dooming all those smaller schools without a doubt and almost immediately. The same thing again goes for the Olympic sports and the women's sports. And so you have to find a package of legislation that is somehow beneficial to everyone. So you can't just say, all right, we're going to just take the Power 4 and carve them off and keep them to themselves, because that's not politically tenable.
Yeah. In your ideal world, the existing individual conference contracts would basically not exist.
I think that you're going to probably have to run those out. I don't know how you terminate them, but have kind of a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Where you can say, okay, by the end of next or middle of next decade, the first part of the middle of next decade, we're going to have an opportunity to make quite a lot more money. And it's not just, again, the Power 4 schools aren't doing that great financially either when you really look at it. But all the schools are going to be able to have a chance to compete. And so they can find ways in the interim period to finance themselves through it, whether it's through private equity, which you've heard move in. Some of the schools have borrowing capacity, some have donors. There are different ways they're going to be able to find their way through, as long as they know there's a date certain in the future where things are going to get meaningfully better. And that's a key to the business model, is that they can make that bet. Right now, if you're Colorado State, there is no hope.
Yeah,
I mean, you can't afford to. And I'm
not trying to pick on them, but just using them as a representative example of a smaller school.
Yeah, how do you ever keep talent? How do you ever recruit talent? How do you keep coaches? You're up a creek.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of how you divide the revenue, that is where we've gotten pushback from the more powerful, higher revenue schools, because their assumption when they hear this is that you're going to divide it out evenly.
Yeah.
I think to your earlier point about competitive parity, like the competition is what sells the product.
It is the product.
It is the product. And so if you're trying to optimize it completely, you would try to make it as even as possible.
Yeah.
But that's not practical. Again, when we look at it through a political lens, we have to understand and recognize that there's a whole history there.
Yep.
And these schools are proud of the investment that they've made and the work that they've done to get to the place that they're in. And they rightfully think that they deserve more money than others who haven't done as good of a job.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have to find a revenue sharing system that works for everybody. But the good thing is the incremental increase in revenue is so large that we could give the Big Ten and the SEC
more
$40
or
$50 million more per year per school. But then also give the smaller schools, $10 or $12 million more, or $15 million per year more. That makes all the difference in the world on a, $20 million budget.
One of the challenges of life in general is doing something that's better for the collective whole that might not be, maybe you get a little bit less than you at the top were expecting, right? So let me come back to that point. First, let me hit you with this one. How many people do you think actually understand on an intelligent basis all of the things that we just talked about that are actively involved in thinking about the future of college athletics?
100.
So it's about 100 people.
Yeah.
How many of those guys, and this is ballpark, I'm not, how many of those guys do you think are primarily looking at all of this through the prism of business opportunity? In other words, private equity guys, as opposed to collegiate experience
there may be a few
guys.
more if you include the private equity groups.
Yeah.
There are some of those folks that really understand.
Those are the sharks.
Yeah, those are the sharks. And there are also some sharks in other parts of the industry as well, as you know.
Yeah.
And so what we have to do is try to divide the people who are selfishly interested in this thing from those who have good intentions.
Yeah.
And who understand the cultural, economic, social importance of college sports.
Yeah.
And they want to find a way to preserve the system. And recognize also that there's a lot more money for everybody to make if we can just work together. We're so used to competing with each other on the field.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah, we get confused with on-field competition and off the field,
and even understanding what the business is, because I think really the business is competition.
That's right.
And the better the competition is, the more money everybody makes.
That's exactly right. And so that's really hard when you're locked in with all your people wearing the same color as you.
Yeah.
And you hate the other guys. I'm never going to work with them. They're a bunch of assholes. Well, no, they're actually your business partner.
Yeah.
And that's how we have to start thinking about it. And so you don't have the luxury of acting like that in real business.
Yeah.
You have to do the things that make logical sense every day or you go out of business. This system has continued to be propped up in this country, but it is literally falling apart and people don't even know it.
I think this is also super important. We're dealing with a lot of brands, what I would say candidly, lighting themselves on fire. We're doing this interview in Nashville. Cracker Barrel is based basically right around here. There's a balancing act between what monetizes best, but might also destroy the underlying brand that makes things so special.
That's
right? And so a lot of private equity guys are great at figuring out how to make the most money, but they're not great at sustaining brands or holding a business together for 20 years. They're trying to get the short-term dollar in expense of the long-term outcome.
Yeah.
Here, I remember Mike Slive used to talk about with me all the time. He would say, I think of the SEC as a public trust. It is something, and I do think there are a lot of people who think of it this way. Their goal is to create something that everybody cares about so deeply, be a good steward of it, and hand it off to the next generation in better shape than it is right now. I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah. That's what I would like to see. That's what a lot of people watching and listening to us would like to see. What is the time frame in your mind that we have to get this right?
Well, every day that passes, the economic situation gets worse. It's bleeding out every single day. And so there is a sense of urgency around it. And, every day that there's a new lawsuit filed, every day that there's, we move closer and closer toward unionization, every day that, another kid loses opportunity is a day lost. And so we need to hurry up. Now, I do think that there's finally real focus on it. We've seen this stuff moving through Congress, but the most encouraging thing to me is that President Trump really cares about this stuff.
He loves college sports.
He loves college sports. And he really is moved by women's sports.
Yep.
We've seen all the different things that he's done with women's sports in support of them. That's extremely popular. And, we've polled it. 85 to 90% of people, and 85 to 90% of people don't agree on anything.
Yeah.
Well, one thing they do agree on is that they want to see women's sports and Olympic sports preserved.
Yep.
Okay. 85 to 90%. Same thing goes for making sure that smaller colleges are protected, smaller schools are protected. 85 to 90% of people agree with that. So we've got to achieve those objectives because that's what people, we get lost in our little bubbles in our individual institutions and we forget that there's a whole other world out there that isn't just big time college football, right?
Yeah.
A lot of other people are affected, a lot of communities, a lot of institutions, a lot of individuals. And so we have to think about the broader picture a little bit. And again, how the whole enterprise works together. Again, I think calling it a public trust I haven't heard that before, but I really like it.
Yeah.
That's what it is. We're responsible for this institution that we may not even recognize is a pillar of our American society. It's everything that is American.
Yeah.
And so we have to preserve it, and we have a bigger responsibility than just, sort of the business that it's become.
You said something earlier, and I appreciate all the time you spent with us here, and I want to do more of these conversations. So if you enjoy this, please reach out to Cody. Don't call him a bitch, even if his team is beating yours. You talked about what I think is so integral here is sort of the idea of sports as the ultimate meritocracy.
Yep. Best
man or best woman wins. I've got a theory. I don't know if you can beat it. Scoreboard is the only thing that's trusted in America today.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
By everybody.
Yeah.
It's the only thing. Like I've coached every sport, not well, my boys. If they put the scoreboard up wrong, everybody in the crowd is like, hey, you missed that bucket. Hey, you got to go fix it. Everybody points to it. Everybody trusts it.
Yeah.
Nobody expects that the score starts anything different than 0-0. Nobody expects it's going to start any different than X number of minutes for every game, right? That's important. I think even more so in this era today where everybody on their phone is calling everybody else bitches all day long, right? how important is it to larger society? Because maybe people out there are like, oh, there's a billion other things going on. That's my argument, my pitch for why sports matter so much and why college athletics matters so much.
I completely agree. I think it's fundamental to our American culture.
Yeah.
And so if you let it die, we're losing something that's very important to who we are.
Yeah.
And so we can't let it die. And I mean, honestly, like we have this cancer that only a few people even really fully understand. But we've got to fix the problem. But again, I'm encouraged by the fact that there are a few really smart people on the Hill on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
Who get it, right? There are people in the White House who get it. And so we've got to get those people together. There are folks in the sports world who understand it, who want the best thing, who want the right thing. And so to the extent we can bring those folks together and find a good solution that everybody can be happy with, that protects everyone's interest, protects the institution, that's what we have to do over the next several months. We need to try to focus on doing it during this Congress. We need to try to focus on doing it while we have a president that cares about it. And so I think the opportunity is now. And if we aren't successful, I really don't know what's going to happen.
From your perspective, for people who have watched this, for people who've listened to it, and they say, boy, I kind of agree a lot with what Cody's saying. What should people do to try to get a resolution that makes sense for those of us who love college sports?
Well, so I would say that I would say that you need to reach out to your elected representative and tell them that it's important to you, because a big part of this is just getting the amount of focus on it that it needs.
Yeah.
And so, they need to pay attention. They need to be thoughtful, and they need to understand what's going on. If we could just get people to understand how everything fits together, everyone will see that it's messed up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the best thing you can do is talk to your friends and your family about it. Talk to the people who you voted for or who you didn't vote for but represent you, and get them to do something.
You have got your son's football game to get to, so I want to make sure you get out of here in time. Is there anything I didn't ask you? This is what I learned, for those of you who haven't heard me before. When I practice law, you do a deposition, you talk to somebody for a long time. Sometimes you get interesting answers because I like to think that I'm smart enough to ask the questions that should be asked. Is there anything you wish you had the opportunity to tell this audience that I haven't given you the opportunity to tell?
I think we kind of covered it at great depth, and this is something I could sit here and talk about all day.
Same. I love this. Yeah.
And I'm just so appreciative of the fact that you're interested in it and that you kind of straddle the political world and the sports world.
Yeah.
And so this is a pretty interesting nexus for you, and something that I hope you'll stay engaged on, because we need voices like yours involved, because again, it's really just getting people to understand it, and understand that there are things going on off the field right now that should be really concerning if you care anything about the college sports world.
I think that people want to find a solution. I hear about it all the time. I want to have as many good conversations like this. You came into town to have this conversation. You didn't have to. I'm going to get you out so you're back in time for kickoff down in Texas. But thank you. Appreciate all the work that you're doing. Cody Campbell, how can people find you and say, hopefully, nice things? I want y'all to say nice things. How can people find you?
So probably the best thing is on Twitter. At CodyC64 is my handle. So, and I post about college sports and, disproportionately about Texas Tech. So you have to ignore that. But there is some stuff that's broadly interesting on there too. So at Cody C 64. Nice, be nice, but tell him thank you for this conversation. And by the way, for you, text me anybody else you think we should talk to. I want to have longer form, interesting conversations about this issue, hopefully get a resolution that does preserve that public trust of college athletics. I love it. Y'all love it. My thanks to Cody Campbell. Follow him on Twitter. Say nice things to him. And we will be having more of these conversations going forward. I'm Clay Travis, and this has been a special edition on part of the future of college athletics. OutKick the show.